Hi, welcome back. It's Amy. All right, so let's review. We've talked about how all of your problems are related to each other, and we've looked at your cycle of behavior. This cycle is comprised of distorted thoughts and confused feelings that result in abnormal and abusive behavior. This whole chain of events is your abuse cycle. And you're probably not even aware of your cycle, which is completely normal. Most people aren't. We're not aware all the time of the things that we do and how we get to the point of doing them. But you really need to take a closer look at your life to see it. But there are things that happen before actual abuse begins. It is kind of the pre-assault part of the actual abuse cycle. We can call the things that happen in this pre-assault cycle precursors. I mean, a precursor is literally a thing that comes before another thing. It's the thing that helps to form whatever follows it. This is what we're going to look at today, the pre-assault part of your cycle. There are several things that may or may not be part of your pre-assault cycle. There are behaviors and thoughts and feelings that, if you look at them alone, might not outwardly indicate that they would lead a person to criminal behavior. But in your case, they might. They are, at the very least, warning signs. And you need to be aware of these things in order to understand your total cycle better. Because if you're experiencing any of these things, it may be a sign that you are sliding into that assault cycle, that abuse cycle. They indicate that there is something wrong with the way you are acting, the way you're thinking, or the way you're feeling. So let's go over these things, which, by the way, if you have any other issues aside from sexually abusive behavior, whether it's drugs and alcohol or gambling or overeating, anything, you will notice that any of these pre-assault behaviors can also lead you into other destructive behavior. All right, first, financial. You're probably irresponsible with money when you aren't feeling great about yourself. You mismanage money, you don't pay your bills, you might buy drugs, you might spend foolishly, you might go on shopping sprees, etc. And this leads to depression and anger and stress. What about employment? When you start having problems, you might neglect your job. You might become a job hopper, completely quit your job, become angry with your employer, blaming them for your unhappiness. You might make excuses not to go to work. You might show up late. You might use drugs on the job, or you might do things to sabotage your productivity at work. What about socially? Well, you might not have a lot of friends in the first place, but socially, it can still become part of your pre-assault cycle, because even these few friends you may withdraw from and isolate yourself. You might make excuses not to see your friends, you don't answer your phone, you ignore your family, those kinds of things. All right, what about your education? What if you're in school? Well, in your pre-assault cycle, you might start to take school less seriously. You might skip school. You might not be doing your homework. What about drugs and alcohol? Chances are you're already using drugs and alcohol, but you might step it up. And as I've said before, this is never an excuse for abusive behavior, but what drugs and alcohol does do is it keeps you from thinking clearly, and it allows you to push aside your conscience a lot more easily. And if you're on drugs or drinking, it may cause you to start fights or become more aggressive. Now, what about marital or dating issues? Chances are, if you're married or dating somebody, you're experiencing problems in that relationship. You might have sexual problems in that relationship, or you may have become sexually abusive in that relationship. What about your leisure time, your free time? Having too much time on your hands can be a very dangerous thing in your pre-assault cycle. If you don't have hobbies or interests that don't involve abusive behavior, you're probably not making very good use of your free time. You could be drinking, watching too much TV, driving aimlessly in your car with no destination in mind. You could be avoiding time with your family and friends even though you have the time. All of these things can be warnings that you are in your pre-assault cycle. What about your health and your appearance? If you're in your pre-assault cycle, you're probably ignoring your appearance and your health. You might be eating a lot of junk food. You might not be exercising if you were exercising. You might not be shaving every day if that were your habit previously. You might be wearing those same stinky sweatpants for 5 days in a row. You could be gaining or losing a lot of weight where you weren't before. Again, if you notice, none of these things individually indicates that abuse is about to be committed if you isolate them. However, they are all common in the pre-abuse cycle, in the pre-assault cycle. You need to see if you recognize any of these behaviors in yourself. If you recognize these things, it gives you the opportunity to intervene and start to make change. No actual homework today, although I would ask you to start to look at any of these things and see if these pre-assault issues are a part of your life. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about part 2, the actual assault cycle, which again, as we go further in this program, we will drill down a lot more on that and get into it a lot more deeply. This is still just an overview of everything we're going to be discussing. Until then, please subscribe to this channel. You can leave comments and questions here on the Facebook page or on Twitter. You can also message me on Facebook if you have any questions or comments that you would rather not see publicly posted. Thank you again for making the effort to change your life so you have no more victims. All right, until then, be well.